Sam Sharp breakfast this morning, which each week, or each mental health week, combats mental health issues facing veterans and their families. This year we heard broadcaster Joe Tilley speak about the tragic tale of his son Spencer, who succumbed to his addiction following his service in the Canadian Armed Forces. And whether it's PTSD, its effect on families, or addictions, our friend Michael Landsberg reminded us they're sick, not weak, and there is help there for them.
Well, True Patriot Love is a national foundation that supports military families, veterans and their families, and connects corporate Canada and employers with veterans and the military. I'm very proud to be one of the people that helped start this special organization. When I left the military, I made a promise to my commanding officer, Al Blair, in Shearwater, Nova Scotia, that I was going to be a very committed civilian to supporting the military. I served during the decade of darkness with the military when people weren't wearing their uniform and Canadians became disconnected with their military. I never wanted to see that happen again, so I said to my commanding officer, I'm going to make sure that as a lawyer, I keep my affiliation, support the troops, support my comrades. So when I moved to Toronto and started my legal career, I started a number of lunches and networking events connecting the military with the business community in Toronto. And out of that, in 2007-8 sprung True Patriot Love, the idea for True Patriot Love to do a one-time dinner to raise money for Rick Hillier's new Military Families Fund that he just created to support military families while their father or mother were deployed to Afghanistan. What was intended to be a one-time dinner to raise funds one time became a lasting foundation. We have an annual breakfast called the Sam Sharp Mental Health Breakfast in Ottawa that Romeo Dallaire and I host. I started it with Romeo when he was a senator, and one of the issues I worked on at True Patriot Love, so that I've been working on since 2008-2009, has been the issue of mental injuries from service with the military, with first responders. And so on the board of True Patriot Love, I was always trying to make sure that we geared treatment and support programs for men and women suffering from what we call operational stress injuries, PTSD, and their families. Because when somebody has an injury like that in the home, it can affect the relationship with the spouse, it can affect the children. So a lot of our grants that we gave as a charitable foundation were geared towards helping people treat, deal with, and overcome some of the challenges from mental health. And when I became an MP, I wanted to continue that work. So I started a breakfast that brings together all politicians. There's no politics involved in this. It brings together people from the military, people from the mental health sector, veterans groups, to a breakfast on Parliament Hill where we hear from a veteran who had an injury, mental injury from service, or a family affected by mental injury from service, and they tell their story, sometimes often difficult stories, but how we can break down the stigma.
And unlike 100 years ago in Sharp's day, today we have treatment, which in the vast majority of cases can help the man or woman on their road to recovery. That didn't exist in Sharp's day.
You know, the worst thing for somebody to do if they have a mental injury is to hide it and to turn in on themselves and to get depressed. We need them to put their hand up and say, I've got an injury. Just like if you had a leg injury from service, you can have a mental injury and we can treat it. And Sam Sharp was an MP 100 years ago, a sitting MP who served at Vimy Ridge. And he took his own life after serving on the battlefield because there was no treatment, because he felt shame for his mental state and his depression brought on by leading and losing his men in war. He felt he had nowhere to go. So we're using Sam Sharp and we're trying to bring his memory back to show that today men and women do have treatment. We do want them to put their hand up. They can stay in the military in some cases if they get their treatment and it works well. I've met veterans that have redeployed after dealing with PTSD. So we want to break down the stigma, and the Sam Sharp Breakfast each year, which is held during Mental Health Week in May, every year it helps us break down that stigma so that people can get help. We hear too often about a suicide from someone in the military or a veteran or a first responder. That's where we failed our comrades, because they felt they couldn't put their hand up and ask for help, and they felt hopeless. We need to tell the stories of people that felt that way but reached out, put their hand up, got treatment. So there's amazing programs like the Veterans Transition Program run out of UBC, which is now helping veterans across the country. There's great programs like Can Praxis, which is equine horse-based therapy, where a therapist in a ranch and a horse-like setting can actually help a veteran reconnect with a family member, deal with their injury. There are so many programs out there. Service dogs, I was pushing a lot of these treatment options as minister. So we need to tell that story so that if someone is struggling, they put their hand up. They don't cut themselves off from society. Well, True Patriot Love has been able to, what I always say, provide a margin of excellence. So if Canada will provide support for someone injured in service to Canada, but sometimes if they'll equip one car for somebody with a disability to drive, and they're a family, they need two cars, they need that second car adapted, True Patriot Love can fill that gap. As military families travel across the country, sometimes the provincial programs for autism or other things for the military kids, the military children, aren't the same. We were able to come in and fill that gap as well. What we wanted to do is allow Canadians to show their support for military families by saying, we've got your back. The country and Veterans Affairs and the Canadian Armed Forces does a good job with family resource centers to help support the military family, because they're serving alongside the mom and dad. But there's always that gap or a bit of a margin of excellence, so that with our family resource centers, True Patriot Love used to say, if you had a little more budget, what would be that last program you'd run for families? And they would often say it would be this program. Well, True Patriot Love would come in and fund that with a grant. So it was, what could you do if you had a little extra funding? And if it met the aims of True Patriot Love, which was physical and mental well-being and wellness and support for families, if it met one of those aims, the charity could fund it. If anybody is interested in any of these programs or supports, True Patriot Love, Wounded Warriors Canada, Trouble Victor, they're all out there. They're always looking for more volunteers and support. So if you share the same passions I do, make sure you get out there and play your role.